Yo, what's good, everybody? It's true, I actually reached infinite without using Thanos this season, and I used Shuri briefly, but it wasn't a traditional Shuri deck. I wasn't using Red Skull, Taskmaster, Zola, all those typical combinations that you keep seeing out there. I basically threw Shuri into a Galactus Nimrod deck that worked out reasonably well. I do have a YouTube video on it. I'll leave that link right above, but honestly, that Shuri didn't really work out super well with Nimrod. It would only go off on occasion. There were better plays to be made in there that you'll see in the video. But before I show you the decks that were the most important in my run up to infinite, I got really bored with the meta. It's a very boring meta. I know this is just repeating everything that everybody else has been saying. It's the same deck over and over again. You're facing a Thanos deck with Leech, or you're facing a Shuri Red Skull deck. I don't really blame anybody for using those decks because ultimately the goal is infinite, and I would have reached infinite way faster had I just succumbed to the meta and just tried it out and just used the Thanos ongoing deck and the Shuri Red Skull deck. It's the easiest way to reach infinite. But the problem is, it is a pay to win type of deck, right? A lot of people don't have access to these cards yet. A lot of people haven't gotten them. Not everybody has Thanos or Shuri. So I wanted to prove to myself and to prove to other people that it can be done without those decks. But I'm going to be honest with you. It was an insane grind, and it was heart-wrenching at times. There were a lot of losses by like 1 point, 2 points here and there that ended up going for 4 cubes or maybe 8 cubes. A lot of leeches just destroyed what was a really well set up hand. In my personal opinion, Leech needs to be kind of scaled back a little bit. I think that Leech is a lot more fair if he takes away the abilities for 1 turn as opposed to for the rest of the game. That is potentially a different video and a different problem, but I just wanted to kind of explain how I felt about the meta and why I decided to use different decks in order to make it to infinite. I wanted to give hope to players that don't have those cards and don't think that they could reach infinite and don't think that they have a shot to actually succeed in Marvel Snap without paying a ton of money. So it's gonna be kind of rare for you to see any pool 4 cards in here. There are gonna be a few because people do have access to them if they get lucky enough to pull them. I decided also not to use Kang in any of these decks because Kang is a pool 5 card that just came out and nobody really has access to him, and it's really hard to have him. But basically the 4 decks that I'm about to show you ended up taking me from about, I would say, like 71, 72 rank all the way up to infinite. And on the screen next to me, I'm showing off the last couple games that I played that ended up taking me all the way there, including the finale, which was actually really awesome and relieving because I grinded for 9 hours on stream that night to get from 95 all the way up to 100. It was painful. But the first deck that I want to talk about is this Null deck, and I know a lot of people don't have Null, but I was lucky enough to pull him from a reserve, and it's just kind of a typical destroy deck. I know what you're probably thinking. Why doesn't he have Nimrod in there? I can't figure out a way that I can make Nimrod really super successful. It's been frustrating me. The power is too low. He shouldn't be a 5-cost card if you're going to have his power that low. I don't know. I'm pretty disappointed in Nimrod, and I haven't gotten him to work like super well outside of a Galactus deck. I wanted to make a Null specific deck where Null just kind of became this fat card where we got to drop Null and Death on the last turn, and it just would have been pretty fun. And it turns out that it was pretty fun. It's a reasonably competitive deck. It is not a meta deck by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. imagination. It works just like your regular Death Wave deck. You're sitting there using a bunch of small cards like Nova, Yondu, Bucky, Carnage, Venom, Killmonger, Deathlock. They're all destroying cards, and you got that special Shang-Chi that works towards Null as well. And you're just trying to create as much power as humanly possible until you drop Wave on turn 5, and then you're gonna go ahead and drop Null in Death or Arrow in Death. If you don't have Null, honestly, you could put She-Hulk in here and do the same thing. I just really was excited about Null, and I really wanted to make him work. In reality, if you just put She-Hulk in there, it maybe would just be a better deck. The next deck that I'm going to talk about is this deck right here, and it's actually not created by me. It was a deck put together by my friend Specimen, who I got a chance to meet and hang out with at Creator Clash. I saw his video on this deck and I immediately wanted to try it out, and I just loved it. It is a typical Clog deck where you're just trying to drop the hood on turn 1, then you're vipering over the hood on turn 2, then you're going ahead and you're dropping something like Green Goblin or Debris to kind of fill up your opponent's lanes. It works really, really well against Thanos decks because Thanos needs that space in order to succeed. And then we have a whole bunch of other disruption cards like Polaris, Killmonger, Shang-Chi, Arrow. The kind of sick turn 5 play here is, of course, using Arrow as you get to see what is going on because of Daredevil, but you can also use Spider-Woman on turn 5. I found that I was using her a lot when I was playing with this deck. Spider-Woman's a solid 8 power, and she potentially minuses 4 power from your opponent's side of the board, and that really swings a location in your favor if your opponent has already filled up that side of the board or you've clogged it for them. It is a really, really cool deck that Thanos decks don't typically really have an answer for, and it just kind of slays them and they don't know what they're doing. The typical turn 6 play was either Arrow or Shang-Chi, but I was also utilizing that Killmonger a lot alongside Polaris. So you would kill all their 1-drops if they had a bunch of them, and then use Polaris to drag a card across the board, and your opponent never knew what the board was going to end up looking like at the end. The third deck I want to talk about is, again, not a deck put together by me. It is a deck made by Dekkster, who puts together a lot of really interesting and fun decks that end up really being competitive, and this bounce deck was no exception. And once again, there's no pool 4 or 5 cards in this deck. So the way you really want to play this deck out is that on turn 1, you want to use something like Iceman or Korg to disrupt your opponent, or drop Quinjet if you've got him, and then you're going to go ahead and play Collector on turn 2. That Collector is so important to this deck. He ends up usually being about a double-digit power card, and he's going to probably carry you to a win in a lane. Then on turn 3, you might play another 1-drop and then beast that 1-drop location and take them back so that you could play them out for free on the next turn. Or maybe you play out a couple more 1-drops and you get that Falcon in there, and that Falcon is going to take them back. That's going to boost up your Collector. If you play out the Hood, that also boosts out your Collector by putting a Demon in your hand. And then on the later turns, you're trying to play something like Agent Coulson or Nick Fury to kind of boost up your deck for that Devil Dino, or more importantly, to kind of have random cards in hand that could end up winning you the game that your opponent does not anticipate because it doesn't factor into the deck archetype. And that's what I really, really like about this deck, is that Agent Coulson and Nick Fury put in a ton of work by pulling out all these random cards that end up winning you the game at the end. If that doesn't happen, of course, you're just going to go with the regular Devil Dino play, and that Collector is going to be big on the other side. And the final deck I want to talk about is the most important deck that we used, and that is this Sandman Control deck, and it is honestly a really, really good deck. This one I actually put together, and your goal is to ramp into Sandman. So you're trying to play Electro or Wave on that third turn so that on the fourth turn, Sandman comes out and stops your opponents dead in their tracks. It absolutely kills Thanos decks as long as they don't have Quinjet and Lockjaw by turn 3. The only issue with this deck is that you don't end up winning a ton of cubes, because a big time play that you're trying to pull off is dropping Dr. Doom on 5 and then Odin on 6. So everybody kind of sees that coming. Once you drop Doom on 5, they see the power get spread across the board. If you end up taking the lead in those locations, people just kind of retreat. So you want to make sure that you're snapping as soon as you have either Electro or Wave and Sandman, because that is going to stop them dead in their tracks. We're using the early turns to kind of take the lead with Lizard, Ebony Maw, or Sunspot. You're not particularly worried about closing off a location with Ebony Maw, because you know that you're probably going to get some Doombots in there, or maybe Captain Marvel sneaks in there, or the true MVP of the deck, Claw. Claw is disgusting in this deck. That extra 6 power goes into a location that your opponents didn't expect or didn't see coming, because people just don't really use Claw. He is just an underrated, incredible card in the game. And some other fun combos, of course, are that you can Arrow on 5 and then Odin the Arrow and just take all their cards right to that same location if you get lucky enough to pull that off. And Magneto just disrupts everything and just kind of screws up their side of the board, and they don't know what's going to end up happening at the end. The Sandman Control deck was definitely the most important deck that I played with, and it got me the farthest, and it ended up winning us the game at the end. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you checking out the content. I hope you have yourself a wonderful rest of your day.